Hello, and welcome to Moonshine Ink's debate on California Senate Bill 277. I am Kara Fox, news editor for Moonshine Ink, and this is Mayumi Elegado, publisher, who will be moderating this evening's debate. This bill has garnered a lot of attention statewide because it has to do with a polarizing topic: immunizations. Legislation was passed in the state Senate in May that would eliminate the personal belief exemption, including for religious reasons, and requires nearly all children enrolling in daycare or school to be vaccinated. If it becomes law, California would become the 32nd state to ban the personal belief exemption and join Mississippi and West Virginia as the only states to ban the religious exemption. As this legislation moves to the state assembly, community discussion has increased on this topic. We welcome two community members to discuss and debate this bill tonight. First, we have Dr. Chris ARTH, a pediatrician who has been with the Tahoe Forest Multi-Specialty Clinic in Truckee for 35 years. He was former chief of staff and chief of obstetrics and pediatrics at Tahoe Forest Hospital. He is currently secretary-treasurer of the medical staff and a voluntary professor of pediatrics at the University of California, Davis. Next, we have Dr. SURA, a naturopathic doctor and manager of NaturaMed, Natural Family Medicine in Kings Beach. With 18 years experience, she holds a doctorate in naturopathic medicine from Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine in Tempe, Arizona, and a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Regents University in New York. She is also a diplomat of the California Naturopathic Doctors Association and the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. Thank you both for participating this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. So we will now start with our opening statements, and we're going to start with Dr. Chris ARTH.
Thank you for inviting me. As a pediatrician, we feel that, or I personally feel that preventative care is probably the most important thing that we do. We certainly take care of a number of sick kids, but we prefer to prevent illness if possible. Vaccines have become a huge part of that particular preventative arm of what we do, and I've practiced long enough to see most of the diseases that we are trying to vaccinate against, as well as seeing the ill effects of the diseases that they can cause. And so I can personally attest to how well vaccines have worked. I also feel that the vaccines have aided in needing less in the way of drugs and other things as we move along. So as we talk further, we'll see that we've forgotten the past, and that I think that that's somewhat has left us with this bill. It may seem draconian, but somewhat necessary to get us to...
All right, that's all the time we have for that statement.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can come back to that point. And now we'll go to Dr. Ann.
Thank you for having us here. I agree that I am not anti-vaccine. I absolutely believe that there is a place for vaccines. I think historically, though, if you look at the place where vaccines have come from, many of the diseases that we vaccinated against were eliminated through better hygiene, through other types of things. All the vaccines have been studied individually. They haven't been studied in combinations or in multi-doses. They have excipients in them and things that have the tendency to build up in systems. Any medical procedure needs informed consent. And there was a Assembly Bill 2109 that was passed in 2012 that was implemented in 2014 that essentially raised the vaccination rates already in California to 97.46%. Without removing the religious and personal belief exemptions. So this is really an unneeded solution to a non-existent problem.
I'm going to cut you off there, and we are going to go to the next part of this debate, which is going to be our question and answer. So if you have anything you'd like to come back to, please feel free to kind of incorporate it into these answers. So if this bill is passed in its current form, do you think that the Tahoe Truckee community would be affected? And how so? And we're going to start with Dr. SURA.
Yes, I do. I think actually if this bill is passed in its current form, everyone's going to be affected by this bill. And this is really just the beginning. You know, we kind of look at it as a gateway bill. First of all, SB 277 will affect the children in our schools that already have a personal belief exemption. If this passes, those students who will need to be homeschooled, that removes a parent from the workforce and a student from the public school or those parents are forced to vaccinate to catch up onto a schedule in order for them to attend the school. And to catch up on that schedule, that'd be 49 doses of 10 vaccines to attend preschool or kindergarten, and 69 doses of vaccines by the end of their public school tenure. And that's just a ton of vaccines to have to catch up on. The decline in enrollment will most affect our teachers, who will be at risk for layoff or lost workforce contribution if even one parent has to leave the workforce, is going to affect our city. And then Section 7 was removed from the bill in order to bypass the Senate Appropriations Committee. That was state reimbursement of funding for implementation of the bill. So the funding for that bill is going to fall on the individual school districts. And that's going to have an immediate impact. There was actually any litigation that comes will be responsible for that. There's already legal precedent. Manhattan School District and the California State Board of Education were forced to pay $6.7 million to a student who they were unable to provide their FAPE for. So that's all going to be an immediate effect on our school district, absolutely.
All right, we're going to turn to Dr. Chris Arth. You have the floor.
Yeah, I believe it'll have an effect on our community as well as all of California, as Ann has stated. I choose to see it as more of a positive effect, in that I think that it will bring some of our low vaccination rates, and we do have numbers at least in the Nevada County area, that says that we are only around 80% vaccinated when children are going into kindergarten. And there's a number that's put out around 5 to 10% of children need to be vaccinated for most given diseases to provide herd immunity, which is immunity for those that either cannot be vaccinated because of medical reasons or that choose not to be vaccinated. And so thus we've had a certain number of outbreaks, and which has been unfortunate. So I think following some of the other states who have implemented similar laws such as this, what we found out is that parents tend to vaccinate so that they can keep their kids in public school. They certainly have the option to be in homeschool, but most will vaccinate. And I think that they research and find out that that's a good thing to do. But I think also the community can find that they're going to see a whole lot less in the way of outbreaks, which we are seeing.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to do the next question. The American Civil Liberties Union of California has raised concerns that the bill would violate the state constitution's guarantee of access to public education. However, parents would have the option to homeschool their children now. Do you think this bill infringes on a child's right to education? Why or why not? Dr. Arth, you have the floor.
Well, I don't feel that it infringes on the ability to have an education. I think it does put a difficult decision for those that do not want to vaccinate their children, but that really in essence is the purpose of the law, so that there are choices. There are choices to either homeschool or to vaccinate your child, and so that the children would be required to be vaccinated to come into public school. And as I referenced prior, virtually all of the states that have had this law found out that the parents have chosen to vaccinate. And so that the legal opinions so far on all of this have all been favorable towards a vaccination. This has gone as far as the Supreme Court nationwide when there's been outbreaks and there's been mandatory vaccination. And it's been found out that the good of the community or good of the whole outweighs the goods of the individuals, and therefore the vaccination program has prevented a lot of disease and has stood in court well.
Thank you. Dr. SURA?
I do think it affects it. I think it affects it dramatically. California, one of the foundations of our Constitution in California is the right to a free public education. Brown v. Board of Education establishes that separate is not equal. Homeschooling is a great educational option, but it's not an equal option. Dr. Arth referred to the fact that it's a choice to vaccinate or not vaccinate. Personal belief exemptions are filed not solely for children that are completely unvaccinated, but they're filed for children that are perhaps missing one vaccine in a recommended schedule, for instance Hep B, which is a sexually transmitted bloodborne disease. Many parents choose not to vaccinate their children for that. For that, they file a personal belief exemption. And those personal belief exemptions are not separated out within the California Department of Public Health. All personal belief exemptions that are filed are assumed to be unvaccinated children. They don't have a way to separate those out. So when you're looking at things statistically and percentage-wise, they really need to be broken down. Smaller school districts, if they have 10 kindergartners entering and have 3 that are unvaccinated have B and filed personal belief exemptions, it appears that they have a 30% unvaccinated rate. So all those numbers have to be taken into account. The Supreme Court cases that were referred to, those were back in a time where it referred specifically to a single vaccine during a very specific epidemic outbreak that was taking place. And now we're talking about anywhere between 38 and 60 doses of vaccines for children to be given to them between birth and kindergarten and through 18 years of age. So it's a very different scenario now.
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's move on to question number 3. The main debate around this issue seems to be about public health versus personal freedom. Where do you stand, and do you think the government should make that decision for its constituency? I'm going to start with you, Dr. SURA.
It is unfortunate that there are children and adults in our society that are immunocompromised and more susceptible to disease and illness. And I think that they deserve any of the protection that the public can provide. On the other hand, there are children who suffer from adverse reactions to vaccines. There's tremendous amount of study about that. The vaccine program, the reimbursable program, has put out more than $3 billion to vaccine injury. It's estimated that less than 10% of vaccine injured families actually go through the entire reporting system, and $3 billion has been paid out to those families since it was instituted. In 1986, the Supreme Court, in upholding the now I'm struggling with the name of it, the National Vaccine
Adverse
Reporting
Reaction
System. Thank you. The Supreme Court upheld that the reason for that existing was because vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. And they absolved the manufacturers from liability for damages to patients, so there's no guarantee for safety. We also know in recent years that there is anywhere from 1 in 4,000 estimates down to 1 in 50 children suffer from mitochondrial dysfunction. And there is research that backs up the fact that vaccines can, in the doses that we are currently at, actually make that mitochondrial dysfunction become present. There was a family that was awarded, Hannah Pauling was awarded an injury award based upon that the vaccines fired that up. And so you can't, how do you test for that in a huge population when you have vaccines on these types of mandatory schedules? That's where the personal belief exemptions come in. That's where selective vaccine comes in. That's where alternative schedules come in. That you work one-on-one with your pediatrician, with your physician as a parent to make the decision that's best for you, your family, and your children. And this bill would eliminate that opportunity.
Thank you. You have the floor, Dr. ARTH.
Yeah, the United States has always been an interesting mix of freedom and laws that we institute to try and protect the public good. And I think this is one of the laws that would come forward to be in just exactly that sense. So we have laws that say that you can't be drunk and drive. We have laws that say you can't carry a gun into an airport or can't carry a gun into a school. And so these are all for public good. And I think this is one of the same things. I will counter at the end some of what Ann had to say, but vaccine adverse events recording system has a number of reports that are absolutely unverified, and most of the money that was given out, there was no association ever made with the given event. And there's a lot of problems with some of the negatives that are being said about vaccine. As Paul Offit would say, who's kind of the father of vaccinology, it is an evidence-based system, and the evidence is there that vaccines are safer than to go without vaccines, take all comers without the medical exemptions. So I don't happily give up freedom. I've been called a Nazi for advocating vaccines and even talking about mandatory vaccines, and so both of us, I think, are putting our necks out a little bit. But I think there are certain times for the public good that the government has to step in, and the government's at its best when it does that. It steps in when there is an overall need and when that is enough evidence to say that this is for the overall good and we're protecting those that need it.
All wrapped up? All right. We're going to move on to the fourth, I think, and final question. The co-authors of this bill say that they wrote it to increase vaccination rates in California to protect students and communities from future outbreaks, especially on the heels of the Disneyland outbreaks this past winter. and also to protect the health and education rights of kids who can't be vaccinated. If this bill is not passed, how would you propose to address these concerns? Dr. Arth, we're going to start with you.
Well, as I think I've stated before, I've been on the vaccine trail for, I believe, 10, 15 years. I've written various articles in the SURA Sun and have been out pounding the pavement to try and educate people that vaccines are a very useful thing for their children's health. This is a new thing for us of now having a law that is mandating. But I have been out there before trying to teach in any way that I can and spread the word. So that would be certainly one thing that I would continue doing. That may not be enough. I think that the other idea I had back a ways was that I think there is an economic burden to unvaccinated children as well, because I think there is increased medical spending. It's been shown that these are all cost effective in the sense, and I'm meaning all of the vaccines. It doesn't take 50 to 60 to catch up, by the way, but it is, all of them are cost effective and can save us all economic dollars on insurance and hospital costs and medical costs. And so I think people may need to pay more for insurance, and maybe that could be another bill that could be pursued. I've considered at times having an unvaccinated waiting room for my office just because they pose a danger. A kid that comes in with measles has what's called the 3 C's, which is cough, coryza, and conjunctivitis. It's indistinguishable from flu and about 56 other viruses, and they're very hard to stop at that point, and they're completely contagious. I'd probably support parents groups, and I've had people come and talk to me saying they think that not only this bill is a good idea, but that I should go to the last step, which is I won't see people unless they're vaccinated. There are a number of pediatricians who do not give care to children unless they're vaccinated. They feel that strong about it, that give your parent a choice of finding a pediatrician that will work with them, or that if you believe that I'm telling you the truth, then if you want to follow with me, then you need to be vaccinated.
All right, we're going to move on to Dr. SURA. Your response.
Well, I think it's pretty clear from my previous answers that I am a very strong believer in personal beliefs and parental choice and informed consent. Again, the AB 2109 that was passed in 2012, Assembly Bill 2109, went into effect in January 1st of 2014. It has had only one school cycle to go through. What that bill essentially did was required parents to go to their pediatrician or their physician and have a discussion about vaccines before they could sign off on a personal belief exemption. And what that bill did between 2013 and 2014 school year and the fall of 2015 school year is that it actually lowered PBEs on just that first cycle by 19%. Okay? And so there's already a bill in place that requires patients, they can no longer just sign the old forms off on the back saying, oh, I don't believe in this, I have to go. They have to go to their physician or pediatrician and sign off on that personal belief exemption that they have been counseled as to vaccinations. California has one of the highest vaccination rates in the nation right now, 97.46%. So I don't think that we need to have a mandated law in place for a series of 10 vaccines. Again, hepatitis B is on that list. Hepatitis B is a sexually transmitted bloodborne disease. It should be given to children who are born to women who are Hep B positive. Absolutely, that's the reason that vaccine is there. But do all children need to have that vaccine? Not in my opinion. So I think that personal freedom is there, and I think there's a balance that's already been found. But we're jumping ahead of the game by not allowing AB 2109, which was already in place, to fully pan out for more than one school year entry.
Thank you. On the heels of the 2010 whooping cough outbreak and the measles outbreak that happened this past winter that ended up affecting 178 individuals nationwide, proponents of the bill say that the state has a compelling interest to pass this legislation. Do you agree? Why or why not? I'm going to start with you.
Well, I disagree. I understand Dr. Arth's point about vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And as I stated earlier, I'm not anti-vaccine. But I am very much pro informed consent and personal choice. The measles in California, the measles outbreak in California, the outbreak, it was in Disneyland, which is an amusement park. It wasn't in one of our private or public schools. This is designed to impact our school children and specifically safety and vaccines in schools. The CDC reports that the source of the infection was almost certainly from overseas, either a foreign national on vacation here at the amusement park that carried it back to the US. A significant proportion of the infected people were adults who were unaffected by California public and private school vaccination laws. And many of the unvaccinated in the outbreak possibly could not be PPE holders because they were adults and they were not requiring an exemption. Certainly the unvaccinated were reported with 39% of the cases as unknown vaccination status. And so that's lumped into unvaccinated because they had unknown. They could have been partially vaccinated. We also know the reason for booster shots are needed because vaccine doesn't confer lifetime immunity. The herd immunity that's often referred to in true immunity, and that's cell-mediated immunity, and vaccines don't prefer cell-mediated immunity. Immunology can be a very dry and boring subject. I'm not going to go deeper into it, but vaccines prefer an antibody reaction, but not pure cell-mediated immunity. The pertussis outbreak in pediatric cases in California, 90% of the 2014 pediatric cases in California were in vaccinated children. And so that, again, that's part of the reason I think, and I'm not sure what year it was, but we added that 7th grade booster shot to DTaps. That 7th graders needed to get it because we were finding that more and more vaccinated children were not conferred a long-time immunity for that particular one.
Thank you, Dr. SURA. We'll move to you, Dr. ARTH. You have the floor.
Yeah, I do think that the current outbreaks or the recent outbreaks give a mandate to the state that they should do something, and we're following along in what has happened in a number of other states, as was quoted by Kara, that over half the United States has stronger vaccination laws than we do. And so the question comes up of how big an outbreak do you need before you need stronger laws. So yeah, we got lucky with this particular outbreak of measles. There were only 10 hospitalizations, but they were hospitalized, nobody died. With the whooping cough, I can tell you there were 2 kids in this community in the last 6 years that died of whooping cough. They were under 2 months of age, were not able to be vaccinated. I hope they are going to be better protected by the new Tdap to the pregnant mothers, and that seems to be working so far. But to say that these are, and furthermore, sure, you don't get as good immunity from vaccines as you do the real disease, but who wants to have meningitis to be immune against meningococcal meningitis? Or who wants to get pneumococcal and Hib to get meningitis from that so you can be immune? Certainly they are natural ways of getting sick, but they are probably not the best way to go. So I think there's been ample evidence that there are outbreaks that can happen. Yes, adults are sometimes part of it because the kids give it to the adults. And it's long been shown that if your kids are vaccinated, you're a whole lot less likely to get the adults vaccinated. And when you talk about losing time in school and at work, those people are going to lose time in school at work. So that there's a whole lot about keeping the kids vaccinated so the whole community does well.
Thank you, Dr. ARTH. And thank you both for taking the time out tonight to help our community understand this issue that affects the state and the nation. We are going to close tonight. You guys have 2 minutes each for a closing statement. And I believe we are going to start with Dr. Ann SURA.
All right. So I would like to close out this evening by thanking everyone for putting this together. Kara, Mayumi, Dr. ARTH for being here. Especially since you weren't feeling 100%. We appreciate you firing up and come over to have this with us this evening. I would like to reiterate my earlier statement that SB 277, in my opinion, and in many, many people's opinion in the state, as Sacramento is hearing, is an unneeded solution to a non-existent problem. California vaccine rates are on the rise, exemptions are down, vaccination tracking is inaccurate, and the reported pockets of exemption are percentage distortions. And I focused on this a little bit earlier. In a smaller school district with 10 students entering kindergarten, 3 of those 10 students don't have the full schedule of vaccines. For instance, not immunized for Hep B, they file a personal belief exemption. but they record all PBs. California Public Department of Health records all PBs as unvaccinated for tracking purposes. So therefore, vaccination rates can be underreported by as much as 2%, and that's straight from the California Department of Health site. The bill is being pushed in response to an outbreak of measles in California. The outbreak that occurred in an amusement park, not a school. The CDC reports the infection came almost certainly from overseas. California has excellent vaccination rates. We're already at 97.46, which is above the CDC's minimum vaccination rate. And I think that means that we're doing great. I think ethically it's wrong for physicians, as much as I respect Dr. Arth and all of his years, to support mandatory vaccines. The AMA Medical Code of Ethics actually states that informed consent is a big part of what physicians should be doing. In fact, it's the patient's right of self-decision can be effectively exercised only if the patient possesses enough information to enable an informed choice. The patient should make his or her own determination about treatment. The physician's obligation is to present the medical facts necessary to the patient or the individual responsible for the patient's care and to make recommendations for management in accordance with good medical practice. The physician has an ethical obligation to help the patient make choices from among the therapeutic alternatives consistent with good medical practice.
I'm going to have to cut you off there and move on to Dr. Arth so he
Okay.
has his time.
Well, thanks again to Ann and to all of you for discussing the subject, because it is something near and dear to my heart, and I do think there is unfortunately a need for a bill like this because we've made some irresponsible decisions as far as our children have gone, and that there are too many unvaccinated people out there, and therefore the community is not protected. So, I mean, and I don't understand how you can say 97% when you say the statistics aren't reliable, and I would agree the statistics aren't reliable out there, but we have statistics that say within this county that there were 20% unvaccinated going in, and not just from hepatitis B. And hepatitis B, by the way, is not just sexually and blood transmitted. It's in every bodily fluid, and there have been a number of cases of babies being not just from their mothers, but living in crowded housing conditions and other places picking up hepatitis B. And the catch-up is not as bad as it sounds. I mean, I think that some people, 50 to 60 is not correct. If you're doing a catch-up thing, it's much less than that. If you go through an entire vaccination schedule, then that's possible. But that's spread over years. The additives, I would again say, are not something that have been proven to be a problem. If you look at them, most of the things that are still left as preservatives, most of the things we're taking out, are things that are naturally, or are occurring and are already in your bodies and have not been proven to be a problem. So also I would say public health is not enough. I wish you can prove by statistic and by looking at now the recent outbreaks that public health is not enough, that they're coming back. And if that was true, then we would not have these things coming back on us. So again, I think that you have to make a stand one way or the other, and I feel that this is something we've come to because we haven't made enough good decisions about vaccination.
Thank you, Dr. Arth. All right. So we're going to take a moment and let each participant respond to the closing statements. And so we're going to go ahead and start with Dr. and SURA.
I just wanted to just take a second and again respectfully appreciate everything that Dr. Arth has said and all the work that he's done for our community. And I do appreciate your stance on this. I absolutely do. As far as the additives and the excipients to vaccines, there's a large outcry to remove thimerosal, the mercury-based preservative in vaccines. Largely that has been replaced with aluminum, or aluminum is put into vaccines because they actually improve the antibody reaction to the vaccines within the body. So they stimulate that antibody reaction. But the cumulative aluminum exposure, a known neurotoxic, is a concern because that's never been studied in multi-dose vaccines. So that's a concern. Additionally, something else that both Dr. Arth and I agree on as far as statistics are concerned, if the California Department of Public Health wants to have better rates, some of the suggestions are measure personal belief exemptions in the first grade. After children have had a chance to go through kindergarten, get on schedule, get caught up, and then all the final series of injections are administered instead of at the time of kindergarten enrollment. Create a system where the student is missing only 1 of 15 injections, isn't considered unvaccinated, but is given credit for shots received and included in the overall vaccination rates. Use a weighted system instead of percentages in small populations where the data skews. For instance, the 10 with 30%. take chicken packs off the required schedule like most industrialized world, and take Hep B off the required schedule. It's a bloodborne
All right,
infection.
thank you. We're gonna move to
Thank
Dr.
you.
Arth for his response.
So, I think as far as, I'm sorry, I missed part of what you were saying.
That's
So I
okay.
was sitting here thinking, the objection to hepatitis B, as I've already stated, I think if you got down to a particular vaccine and area, the problem with pulling out vaccines and anything to the overall schedule, as I've said, there's evidence-based that says these work. The additive question, yes, thimerosal was taken out. It turned out to make absolutely no difference. The ethyl mercury, methyl mercury difference is huge, and that kind of mercury did not cause autism, did not cause problems. And they've actually done studies now with aluminum and found out that the levels of aluminum do not go up in a child that's vaccinated. That's been studied. So to necessarily nitpick at some of these things and say that makes vaccines bad and that makes it so that it isn't worthwhile, unfortunately that gets into so many people's head that we're in the situation we are, where we're waiting for bigger outbreaks.
Well, thank you both, Dr. Arth and Dr. SURA, for participating in this lively and passionate discussion on this controversial issue. We really appreciate you being here. And for more information, please visit moonshineink.com, and thank you for helping us keep Tahoe smart.